I was going to ask you, as a tracker, do you see changes in the government's negotiating position?
Under the current government, I have not seen a change in the behavior of the delegation. But that being said, I mean, I interact and work with the Canadian delegation, and I'm scheduled to have a Skype phone call with the new lead negotiator, Mr. Guy Saint Jacques, tomorrow. And having worked with these negotiators, I do believe that they're doing their very best to sort of be productive in the negotiations. But at the end of the day, they have to represent the policies and the bottom line, sort of the framework of what they're allowed, the frame of the political opportunity that they have based on the government bottom line back home. So they're working with a really constrained policy space at the moment. And until there's a government change or change in the current government's climate vision, I don't envision the delegation changing its role in the negotiations anytime soon.
And do you think that change in the government's position or in the government will come as a result of pressure or built into the differences within the main parties, so that if there is a change of government, there'll be automatically a change of negotiating stance at the UN?
I think it's sort of iterative. It's a function of sort of political party pressure on a parliamentary level. But ultimately, of course, I fervently believe that the social movement that's coalescing in Canada around climate change will be the deal breaker for what our country does on climate change. And last year, I coordinated the 350.org Day of Actions in Canada, and that was one of the most largely attended Day of Actions. Our country was the second largest contributor to the Day of Actions around the world. And this Sunday, we're going to be having hundreds of actions from all across the country that are actions focused, calling on the Harper government to take the cue from everyday citizens that are already willing to take action on climate change. So we're seeing this sort of narrative grow and develop in Canada, and it's only a matter of time until the current political representatives follow the lead of everyday citizens.
And money, can I ask you about money? I've seen from a little email correspondence before we came on air, reference to Canada's newest announcement on fast-track financing. Can you just explain is that a shift of policy?
It's not a shift in policy, but it's a statement on a policy that Canada basically foreshadowed. It said it would make an announcement in Copenhagen with fast-track financing, which is basically the agreement of developed countries to allocate $30 billion towards climate projects in developing countries immediately, so between 2010 and 2012. And so Canada, just on Friday, announced what its share of the contribution will be to this financing. Canada has announced $400 million will go towards fast-track financing, which sort of as a standalone statement sounds really exciting, but based on some of the analysis that some of my colleagues have done back in Canada and what I myself have done, just as sort of as a lay, everyday person looking at the announcement, there are some very stark alarm bells or concerns with what was represented or with what was announced. So.
And sorry to jump around slightly,
Yeah.
but just going back to what you were talking about before, there's obviously a lot of activism. You're organizing big demos, there's a lot of protests. So people are active. But what about engaging with the actual UN process, which is what you're trying to do? Is that something that only a handful of people can do in Canada, or do you think that citizens can get involved with the UN process, that more citizens can get involved, or is it just too remote?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly in a nutshell what Adopt a Negotiator and what my role as a Canadian tracker is for, is to open the doors of what is otherwise an extremely inaccessible, costly process and make that available for everyday citizens to engage with. I don't think it's necessary for all Canadians to prioritize sort of budgeting to travel and emit carbon dioxide to become what they call a carbon, or there's a sort of endearing term for people that travel from climate meeting to climate meeting that I forget right now. But basically, I don't think it's essential for young Canadians or for concerned Canadians to express their sort of or to engage politically through the UN. But it's essential that young people and that Canadians in general follow what happens at the UN, and they use what happens at the UN to write their member of parliament, to engage politically domestically, and also, to whatever extent possible, to follow what's happening at the UN and to email the negotiating team. So again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, I think it's an iterative process as well. I think that Canadians need to put tons of pressure politically on the domestic level, but then at the same time we need to recognize how this relates and connects to Canada's performance at the UN.
Okay, so I've got a final question here for you.
Yep.
If the subsequent, in the next couple of meetings of these negotiations, the youth groups resume their Evildoers of the Day award and they award a sack of coal to the people who've behaved most badly in the negotiations, do you think Canada will still be there, or do you think it's through maybe even small changes in its negotiating position it'll get off the bad guys list?
I would like to say that Canada will never get a Fossil of the Day award again. I mean, that would be my dream as the Canadian tracker, to see Canada no longer be viewed as the villain in the negotiations. But in all truth, I think that the direction and the vision of the current government is so far removed from where we need to be in the negotiations that I can't in truth bring myself to say that we will be taken away from the radar of civil society anytime soon as a sort of villain in the process. That being said, it's only all the more reason for Canadians to continue doing what we're doing, which is putting pressure on the government until we see a policy change at the UN and domestically with our climate legislation.
But as a tracker and as a relatively young person, everybody's relatively young to me, how positive are you? You're exuding positiveness in the sense that you can see change, you're clearly engaging with the process, but there's a big ship to turn around in Canada, it seems. This government certainly is pretty committed to a path that is not really moving ahead on tackling climate change. So how realistically optimistic are you that the government or the next government or Canadians in general are going to be shifted on this and that we'll see serious changes?
That's almost sort of like the big question at the end of the day. And to me, it comes down to there's a sort of political feasibility to that question. And there's almost a sort of existential dimension to that question as well. And I think on both, so in terms of the political feasibility, I mean, we've seen social movements in history that have incredible power to cause a U-turn in government policy. The social movement that happened in the United States, the civil rights movement, is just one example of what ordinary citizens can do when they mobilize together. And then if you sort of look at this from the existential perspective, even if there's uncertainty as to what Canada will or will not do before Cancun or by next year or within the next 5 years under the sort of current political climate in our country, it almost doesn't really matter to me as a young people and as a young person, because at the end of the day, it seems so much more rational, it's so much more sustainable, and it's so much more affirming for me as a Canadian citizen to align myself with solutions than to be the sort of obstructive sort of participant in the climate negotiations that Canada currently is. So it doesn't really leave me with much choice. And I do have hope that social movements can profoundly change policy, and I think we're seeing that right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna.
Thank you for having me.
And very good of you to range from politics to existential
I try.
approaches. That's a very broad sweep. So I wish you the best of luck for your struggles in Canada.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much. Bye.
Take care.